We started a series I'm really excited about last week on the book of Ecclesiastes. What I'm so excited about is that this book has come alive to me. And we're studying this question: what does it mean to live well in this world? There's a perspective that Ecclesiastes gives. The Bible gives us 3 books of wisdom: Proverbs, Job, and Ecclesiastes. And the book of Ecclesiastes is often misunderstood. But the message that's transformed my life hopefully will transform yours as well, because there's something I believe has been missed, something that people have misunderstood, and it's a powerful and relevant truth for each of our lives. We learned last week, if you haven't been with us in the series, you can always go online and catch up at any time. We're going to be building each week on each other. But we learned a word last week that's absolutely essential to understanding the book of Ecclesiastes. It's the word hevel. You can ask the question, what the hevel is going on? Because why? The word hevel is Hebrew. And what's often misunderstood, what's lost often in translation, the word hevel literally in Hebrew means smoke, mist, vapor. And it was intended by the teacher to be a metaphor. But when it's translated into English, often it's translated either vanity or meaningless. And what the author is, or what the teacher is attempting to communicate is not that life is meaningless, but often the meaning of life is unclear. Because sometimes it can be disorienting, sometimes it can be confusing, sometimes we don't know what's really going on, but the overarching message that we're learning through this book is that wisdom is trusting God even when you don't know what's going on. Even when it doesn't seem like it is the right thing to do from your own perspective. Trusting God is what true wisdom is all about. And so the other thing that he's wanting to communicate through the metaphor, like smoke, it's temporary, it's fleeting. And life is that way. We recognize that things are constantly changing. Things are constantly moving in these directions. You know, we were once athletic, beauty, all of those things. Life goes on, things change constantly. And we're in this process where we recognize that life is so often fleeting. And it's important to recognize that it's here. And so, in understanding this book, we talked about this last week. There are 2 voices in the book. There's the voice of the teacher, which is the predominant voice. It's Solomon in his later years. But we're introduced to the teacher by the author, and the author is anonymous. The author introduces us to the teacher in Ecclesiastes 1:1, but then the author comes in at the end of the book, chapter 12, summarizes the lesson of the teacher, helps us process it all, and has the final word. So why has the author collected these writings? Why has he taken the words of the teacher? What does he want us to see? What does he want us to understand? Well, the first thing is that the author wants the teacher to challenge our view of the world, sometimes set it on end. And the other thing that he wants to do is allow the teacher to deconstruct all of the ways we as humans attempt to find meaning and purpose in life apart from God. Things like wealth, or pleasure, or career, or status. See, Solomon gave himself to all of these things. When you read Ecclesiastes, here was Solomon diving in. He went after pleasure. He went after work. He went after all of these things. And to him, what he discovered was all hevel. It never made any sense because his perspective, as we talked about in this book, is life under the sun. From a purely human point of view, so often our pursuits, think about this for a moment, like career. We spend so much of our time, so much of our energy in life going after our career. But when we're honest and look at it, look at the stress. Look at the toll that it takes on family, marriages, and other fronts. Or by the time we're successful enough to gain any wealth, we're usually older and more limited in how we can enjoy it. And then we're faced with this reality: we are going to turn it over to people that may not even care about what we spent our whole life working to achieve. It's all hevel. Or think about pleasure for a moment. I meet people all the time, they're living for the party life, they're living for the vacations, we're on the next vacation, oh yeah, or they're living for the weekend, TGIF, oh man, that's right, right? But here's the truth, we can go after that, But guess what? Here's the sad reality of life. Monday's always coming. And we're always reminded, okay, that it's all hevel. So in essence, the teacher comes along, and the other phrase in the book that we learn, he calls it chasing after the wind. Literally in Hebrew, it means to shepherd the wind, which seems futile because as humans, we can't control the wind. And that's the point he's trying to bring about. That, see, Solomon was the king, and often God spoke to the king in reference to his leadership of the nation as a shepherd, shepherding over the people. But if you've ever been in charge of a situation and you have human beings that you're supposed to lead, sometimes it's easier to herd cats. It's like trying to get your family ready for church on a Sunday morning, and things just go awry. Why? Because everybody has their own free will. You don't have control over things you think you have control of. And although, guys, raising your voice doesn't necessarily get the job done. Can you all say amen or oh me? Because you know, right? You try your best, but guess what? This book comes along to remind us that we try to control outcomes and we can't because we're not in charge. God alone is. Trusting God, that's where it's humbling to us. The realization we learned last week that we need to seek God's will, do God's will, God's way, and trust Him. Because believing that God is always working on our best behalf. That God, and that takes trust, which is difficult. It's hard, especially when you don't know what's going on. And so therefore, this week we're going to look at, and today can be a little bit intense, so I'm kind of warning you, buckle your seatbelt, because why? What the author wants the teacher to do, he explores 3 disturbing observations about life. They're all true, and that's the problem. You can pretend like things are not really this way, but guess what? That's foolish. There is a perspective that we need to learn and understand as we go through this. So here's the title of my message today. It's called The Cold Slap of Reality. You ever watch a movie or something and someone starts freaking out over something happens and somebody slaps them and they go, oh, thank you, I needed that, right? Well, have you ever had situations in life where something hits you that you didn't expect or see coming? You ever have that happen? All of a sudden, you receive news that a friend or family member suddenly passed and you don't understand it. All of a sudden, you get notification that your company that you worked for years is downsizing. Or all of a sudden, things just go out of control. Life seems to take a detour and you're wondering, what is going on? I mean, think about this. 2 years ago, who would have saw a pandemic come that would entirely change everything we know normally about life? But think about it. We just remembered 20 years when 9/11 occurred, and it changed our world. See, too often things happen in life, and the cold slap of reality, I know personally from me, before I was in full-time ministry, I had an insurance agency, okay? And one thing, this is a little bit of an inside track about it, you might not know this, but my job was not only servicing my clients, but selling. I mean, it's a whole part of my career. Well, in the insurance industry, it's kind of inside track, they watch an agent's portfolio for what they call their loss ratio. Now, what control do I have about my clients getting in accidents, having things happen to their homes, or any of the other? But all of a sudden, they come to me one day and say, excuse me, Ken, your portfolio, your loss ratio has now reached a level that we're shutting you down. You can't write anymore. This is my income. This is my life. See, the cold slap of reality is you can't control, but guess what? In the middle of it, God can be trusted. And it's hard in those moments. I remember when my wife and I got notification that her sister was diagnosed with having brain cancer. Immediately, we went to Pennsylvania. My sister-in-law was having an operation to remove a tumor. And my wife and I walk into the hospital to meet my brother-in-law there in a waiting area. As soon as I walk in the door, he says, I need to talk to you. I have a problem with your boss. What's he talking about? He's talking about God. Why? I'm like, Okay, yeah, the cold slap of reality. But what the teacher wants us to know and understand is this: 3 disturbing observations he makes about life. They're true. They can be disturbing, so sit tight. But there's something to be learned in them. First one, his observation is this: the march of time. Time. All of us are given the same 24/7. But the reality of it is you can't stop it. Time continues to move on. You have no control over it. Time just keeps going. It's like an older member of our church told me a number of years ago. It's so funny. I never forgot it. I said, life is like a roll of toilet paper. The closer you get to the end, the faster it seems to go. Right? Come on. You want to put the brakes on. You want to hold because, my kids were just in nursery school. Now they're in college. Where did time go? Have you ever asked yourself the question? But see, time is a reality. And this is the way the teacher says it. He says, generations come and generations go, but the earth remains forever. In other words, guess what? We build cities, technology advances, but guess what? Human beings never really change. People were mean years ago, people are mean today. People have trouble getting along years ago, people have trouble getting along today. We think we're so evolved, so advanced as a culture. We've just figured out other ways to kill one another, and we do it more effectively and worse than any ancient time ever did. Ouch. And then he goes on to say this. He goes, no one remembers the former generations. And even those yet to come will not be remembered by those who follow them. In other words, what is he saying to all of us? It's hard, but we have to realize that on a cosmic scale, because remember, his perspective is life under the sun. So from a purely human point of view, your life, no matter how many years you're here, is like this. It's a blip. It's seemingly insignificant in the cosmic scale of things. And guess what? Time continues to move on. And all of a sudden, things change. Music change. Movies change. I remember I was discipling 2 young men, and I made a reference to a movie. I mean, it was so when this movie was like, I think it was so iconic when I was, saw it years ago. Everybody knows that movie. So I bring up this movie reference when I'm discipling these guys, and I'm like Animal House. And they're like, what? I never heard of that. I'm like, what? You've never heard of it? I was like, yes, because time goes on. It's kind of like my kids' friends come over to the house. I always kind of join in on this end. I love to talk smack with these guys about sports and stuff. But my kids' friends are talking about, man, LeBron, he's the GOAT. Okay, talking about LeBron James. I'm like, you poor souls. You wear his sneakers, but you never saw MJ play. Thank God for the Last Dance, right? But yes, guess what? Jordan changed the way, but listen to me. All of a sudden, there will be a time when nobody's even talking about LeBron anymore. Why? Because generations come, generations go, and you will be forgotten. And that's just the reality that life goes on, and you can't control it. Because what is he saying to us? That eventually, time will erase us and everything we care about. Ooh, humbling, right? Second thing that he observes is this: death. That's why some people hate this book of Ecclesiastes. Because it seems like he's caught up talking about this, because he makes the perspective from a human point of view. Humans are no different than animals because we're all going to die. And this is the way he says. He goes on to say this. He says, the same destiny ultimately awaits everyone, whether righteous or wicked, good or bad, ceremonial clean or unclean, religious or irreligious. Good people receive the same treatment as sinners. And people who make promises to God are treated like people who don't. What's he talking about? It seems so wrong that everyone, and here again is the perspective under the sun, from a human point of view, everyone suffers the same fate. Already twisted by evil, people choose their own mad course, for they have no hope. There is nothing ahead but death anyway. Now, when I was in insurance, the one insurance that nobody wanted to talk about? Life insurance. Which is really, really selfish, because guess what? If you love your family, don't you need to provide? Because the thing that is, last time I checked mortality tables, they were running 100%. Because we're all going to die. Now, nobody likes that. What he's saying here is this: rich or poor, wise or foolish, death is the great equalizer. Because when you go to a cemetery, what you discover is this: on every tombstone are 2 dates that you have no control over. You don't have a control of when you were born. And guess what? No matter what you do, how many vitamins you take, how many Pilates you do, you can't control when the second date happens, the day you go home, the day you die, right? All you have control over is a dash. And we don't even control much of that. The point is, what are you living for? Because life is a gift from God. And the way you live it is the way you show appreciation, love for, and respect to God who gave it. That's why when you live for things that don't matter, when you're living for the temporary, when you're giving your time, your attention to all the rest of this stuff, you get ripped off. Jesus said, what is it good does it do you to gain the whole world and lose your own soul? To miss God in the midst of it is foolish. But no, it's teaching us that we're all going to die. So we need to gain perspective, because this is the cold slap of reality. That's why he's like, oh man, why did I come today? But listen, he goes on a little further. He goes, the last one is even the most disturbing of all. He called it chance. Really, the teacher felt like he found a glitch in the system. This is the way he says it in Ecclesiastes 9. He said, I have seen something else under the sun. The race is not always to the swift or the battle to the strong, nor does food come to the wise or wealth to the brilliant or favor to the learned, but time and chance happen to them all. In other words, what is he saying? This is where we struggle. Why do bad things happen to good people? Because Proverbs has this kind of cause and effect reality. If I do good things are going to happen to me. And Ecclesiastes comes along and says, listen, whoa. There are no guarantees that life will turn out the way you want or the way you expect. But that's not a need to be depressed. Trust in God. Because it's hardest to trust. When you begin to recognize you're not in control, that is very, very humbling. Because we're always trying to control outcomes. We're always trying. In fact, people spend so much of their time attempting to tell God what he ought to do. Right? But God is saying, listen, I'm God, you're not. The wisest thing you could ever do is just trust in me. And that's what we're getting, because what? Here's the point. Life's hard reality should teach our hearts to revere God and seek his wisdom. See, people struggle with this idea of the fear of the Lord. Let me give you the simplest definition you could ever have. The fear of the Lord is humility, plain and simple. It means that I know God is God and I'm not. I'm not in control, he is. And it's learning to navigate my life dependent on him. That when life doesn't go the way I anticipated, when things don't go this way, I don't need to lose my mind. I can trust in God who has my back. God is always working for my best interest. But that is difficult when you're not in control. That is difficult when life doesn't go the way you anticipated. And you can pretend it's not happening. Sticking your head in the sand and pretending like these are not true is just foolish. No, there's something he wanted us to gain. Because there's an insight in the book that we need to gain this perspective of. He says in chapter 3, he says this, he made everything beautiful in its time. He has also set eternity in the human heart. In other words, there's a point at which we need to recognize when I'm living for the temporal, I'm missing it. That there is something bigger. There is something broader. God is eternal. And there is an eternal reality, because what I do today has the impact on eternity, which I often lose perspective about. But God has put eternity in our hearts, that choosing to obey God today, when you don't see the immediate gratification, when you don't see the reward at the end of this, when life doesn't go the way you anticipated, because you know what happens when we discover chance? That's usually what happens is people have a faith crisis. In other words, they get angry at God. They check out. They said, well, you know what? Because they prayed, it didn't happen the way they wanted it to happen, so now they're angry at God. When they have failed to realize that God is God, he invites us to trust him, because that's what true wisdom is. But life's humbling reality should bring us back to this point. Because why? He goes on to say, yet no one can fathom what God has done from beginning to end. You're not God. You don't know. He goes on to say this, I know that everything God does will endure forever. Nothing can be added to it and nothing can be taken from it. God does it so that people will fear him. He brings humility into this month to say, listen, the best thing in the world for you to do is to recognize I'm God and you're not. Trust in me. And so it's hard on those ends. And so this is what we begin to recognize. Listen to me. A life of wisdom is learning to truly trust in God. Because listen, at the moment that you relinquish and acknowledge and accept the fact that you're not in control, you know what happens? Life actually gets easier. Because you know what? You won't be freaking out when life doesn't go the way you thought it was going to go. You won't be spending undue time stressed out, anguished over all of this stuff. Because why? Because you've learned to trust in God. God's got it under control. God is moving. See, that's truly, listen to me, that's truly what a life of faith is. A life of faith isn't directing God to do what you want. Because faith is not manipulation. Faith is trusting that God's God. He will do what he said in his time, in his way. And the easiest thing for us to begin to understand is that I need to trust in you. Because why? Faith is confidence in the unseen. See, too often we allow the circumstances of life to dictate what we believe. But no, we have the realization that we have a book full of what God has done, what God will continue to do. Our job is to trust in him. Because why? Faith is a realization of the unseen. Doesn't it tell us that we walk by faith and not by sight? That when I don't understand what's going on, well, I can trust in God. God's got it under control. He doesn't need my advice. He doesn't need me telling him how to do what I expect him to do. I just need to release it. I need to let go. I need to let God do what he said he would do. And my job is to trust him. Isn't that what Hebrews 11:1 says? Now faith is the substance. See, it's something that's not just wishful thinking. Faith is the substance of things what? Hoped for. The word hope in the Greek means a confident expectation of a favorable future. And why could I be that way? Because trust is rooted in the character of God. And the fact is that faith is in the unseen. That knowing when I don't know, when all life seems out of control, God is working on my behalf. I can trust in him. It's confidence in the unseen God. But you know what? There are two things that will work to destroy your faith. Two things that will upset the apple cart. One is complaining. You know what's the problem with complaining? God hates it. I've taught my children since they came out of their mother's womb that the attitude that we should have about complaining is we hate it because God hates it. Right? Because can I call it for what it is? You know what complaining is? Complaining is saying that if I were God, I would do things differently. If I were God, I would do things better. It is so arrogant. It is so, but because what? We're not God. We can't comprehend all of the things that are so complex in our world. Trust is saying, God, I don't know. I don't understand. But I believe you're God and you're faithful to do what you promised you would do. You see, you got to stop the complaining because it'll destroy your faith. And the second one that attacks your faith is worry. You know what worry is? Worry is the fear that God won't come through on his promises. And what do you need to do about that? You need to fight it. Fight the good fight. You listen, because why? The responsibility is we have. See, the Bible says God's not given us a spirit of fear, but a power, love, and a sound mind. I need to keep my mind established. Why do we have Scripture? We can read. The Bible says faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the Word of God. You have to recognize when you are reading in Scripture what God has done in the lives of other people, they had no idea what was going on when they were facing those situations. We get the luxury of knowing the end of the story. But guess what? It's to encourage us that when we don't know what's going on, when we face difficulties, the wisest thing we can do is trust in God. That's not a cop-out. That's the truth of what faith really is. Faith is not manipulation. Faith is not dictating to God what you want to see happen in your life. Faith is accepting that God's will is the best thing for me, and I can always trust in Him. I walk by faith and not by sight. Because the one thing that never changes, that's why we have the Bible for perspective. By faith, through generation, through ages, by faith, Noah. By faith, Abraham. By faith, Moses. All of the different people learned that in the midst of circumstances that you have no idea what's going on, that I can trust in God. And so in essence, listen to me. Faith requires knowing my part and trusting God with the rest. See, when in my sabbatical, this is something I had to learn on this front. Is God, this is some of the way I pray now. God, give me the courage to do what is my part and allow you to do what only you can do, because I'm not in control. Lord, you know, see, our part, you have to stay in your lane. Too often, we're attempting to do God's job, because like I said, if you just check up on your prayer life too often, we're telling God what we think is best, what we want to happen in our lives, as opposed to saying, I trust you, direct me. I am to do your will. Right? But here's the point. Listen to me. What's our part? See, faith, what's faith's responsibility? The Bible says, without faith, it's impossible to please God. For he who comes to God must believe that he is. What's my part? To continually remind myself who God is, what God has said about himself, and what the testimony of Scripture has said. We are to guard our hearts. Why? Because doubt, unbelief, opinions of others, experts in our world are all trying to get us to deter from what we have been given and instructed by God to do. But we are to remain faithful, trusting that what? God will do what God said he will do. He will do it in his time and in his way. I may not know how, I may not know when, but I can trust in God. Second reality of what's our part is faith, to fight the good fight of faith. In other words, I have to keep the doubts, the disbelief, all of it. Sometimes that's why I told you last week you need to shut off social media sometimes. Because guess what? You're listening to stuff that's fostering fear inside of you, and you need to unplug from that and plug into the things that remind you of the faithfulness of Almighty God. Come on, we're in group season. If you're not in a group, you're ripping yourself off because you need to be around people that encourage you, inspire you, help you in your walk of faith. You weren't intended to do this alone. But we have our own reasons and rationales and excuses and what? But the trust in God is doing life the way he designed us to live. Our part is keeping strong in what we trust God and leaving God with the rest. So stop trying to figure out. Stop trying to calculate the time. Stop trying to say all the different things that you want to see. Trust God. And the last one, listen, this is something I desperately needed to learn. In the time of my sabbatical, I became reacquainted with an author. I read a book by him years ago, John Eldredge. It was called Wild at Heart. But John Eldredge is not only a brilliant author, he's also a therapist. And one of the books I read during my sabbatical was called Take Back Your Life. And I learned this practice of benevolent detachment because, listen, trust is giving up control by practicing benevolent detachment as a way of life. What do I mean by that? Well, too often, listen to me, we can't control situations. Coming to the realization that God's God and he can only do certain things. But detachment, here's the point. Too often, we're carrying things we were never intended to carry. You have burdens, you have concerns, you're concerned about your kids, you're concerned about your work, you're concerned about all the rest of those things. But see, you were never created by God to be a mule and carry all that baggage. You're carrying the baggage of your past. You're carrying the baggage of the worries of your future. You're carrying all this stuff. And God is saying, listen, I didn't design you to live this way. Detachment means to let go. Detachment means to release. Detachment means, and the reason it's called benevolent is because the most loving thing you can do for yourself and for the people around you in your world is to let go and allow God to be in that place. Because listen to me. I almost let all the concerns, all the things, I love all of the people in this church. When people get sick, when problems start going on, and you carry all of this, you feel like, what can I do? How can I do it? Finding myself being weighed down and killed by the things that I was never meant to handle. And the truth is, it took me detaching to come to the realization that no, what does Jesus say? Jesus said, come to me, all you who are heavy laden and burdened. And what? Give it to me. Jesus says, give me everything. Give me everybody. So what I began to practice, I learned from John Eldridge, was this. I began to practice this. Jesus, I give you everything. Jesus, I give you my life. Jesus, I give you my wife. I give you my kids. I give you the people of Vertical Church. I give you the finances of this place. I give you my leadership. In fact, before I walked up on this stage today, I'm like, Jesus, I give you my preaching. Because guess what? I wasn't designed to make all of this happen. I was just designed to live what I was created to do. This is what Scripture has told us. It's the admonition. In fact, it's a command in Scripture. God said, cast all of your cares upon me because I care for you. That's what we have to believe. See, we weren't meant to carry this stuff. We weren't meant to be weighed down, worrying about our kids, worrying about our future, worrying about your retirement, or all the rest, worrying about the pandemic. Are you kidding me? God is in charge. Nothing has happened that has caught God off guard. You and I have to get to the place that faith says, God, you're in charge. I'm not. I'm along for the ride. Because God offers us this gift, listen to me, of a carefree life. And it is possible. But I'm going to tell you what, when you begin to practice this, it takes time. Because when I started coming, you go through the motions at first. But when you actually begin to let go, when you actually begin to be real with God and yourself, and release, all of a sudden your soul finds rest. You're like, whoa, man, the load of that was overwhelming. And God says, well, I never intended you to carry that. See, benevolent attachment's a way of life. It lets God be God. Because why is this important? Listen to me. When you're overloaded, when you're weighed down, there's no room for God. When you release, when you come to God sincerely and say, I give you my wife. I give you my marriage. I give you my children. I give you this. In those moments, you make room for God because God can show up and do what only God can do. But if you think you're in charge, if you think you're in control, then you leave God on the sidelines wanting to help but finding no place because you have a free will. Nobody can make you do that. This is what Jesus wanted us to understand. Give me everything. Give me everybody. And sometimes you got to name it because you know what you've been concerned about. You know what you've been burdened down about. And you got to get real with God. You got to come. You got to get down. You got to say, God, right now, I give it to you. And you got to keep until all of a sudden you find breathing space. You're like, whoa, all right, God, you are in control. See, when God's in control, life really does become easier. Because you weren't meant. You need sometimes the hard slap. That's why I call this the cold slap of reality. Because sometimes life has to show you. Because we know it intellectually, but emotionally, we live like we're in charge. We live like, you know what? I'm gonna man up. I'm the one. I'm gonna direct my family. I'm gonna do all this, right? And I said, whoa. The wisest thing a man can do is to realize that Jesus is Lord. Let me lead the way. Remember, you're a follower, not a leader. Leading means let your family follow you following God. That's what Paul said. Follow me as I follow the Lord. And so practicing benevolent attachment means what could God do if you really let go, if you really learned to release? I want to close today with a young man named Steve and let you hear his story of when he let Jesus, when he let it go, gave it to him. You have no idea what God can do in the midst of it. Watch Steve's story.
grew up in church, and I had some experiences when I was younger where I'd come to the altar and give my life to Christ. I didn't really know what to do with it after that. I ran into my friend Matt, who I hadn't seen in 25 years. I actually grew up in church with Matt, and he invited me to celebrate recovery. Hi, my name's Steve Shack. I've been coming to Vertical Church for about 4 months now. 12 years old, I said to my mother, I'm not going to church anymore. I don't believe in God. It's my life. I'll do what I want with it. And my story is basically by 34, I had been addicted to drugs for 17 years. I've been to many hospitals. I've been on many medications. I've been arrested many times. And I found myself in this hospital, and I was probably 3 days in, and I was hopeless, and I didn't think there was any chance that I could get better. I mean, it was 17 years of this. There's nothing I see that's going to change me. If all this stuff hasn't changed me, all these consequences haven't changed me, what could change me? So I'm in detox again. It's 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm physically sick, shaking. I hadn't slept in 3 days. Everything in me is screaming, leave. I mean, a recurring thought in my head was, you either got to kill yourself or go find more drugs wherever you could find them. And they let us have our phones because of COVID. And the thought came into my mind, look up the song, Open the Eyes of My Heart, Lord. I looked up that song, and it was a 12-year-old kid who had been born to drug-addicted parents, who was adopted by his aunt and uncle who were Christian, and he had a gift for singing, and he sang Open the Eyes of My Heart, Lord, and it just broke me. Everything in me that was screaming, leave here, turned into try one more time. It's the same thing that brought me to the altar when I was a kid. You know, it brought me to my knees in that detox. I feel like God called me off that stuff. And I've since tapered entirely off of the methadone. I didn't know where I was going to go, really. I had no idea where I was going to go. I knew I wanted to get off this methadone. I knew that I was willing to do whatever it took. It's like this, my life, I'll do whatever I want. And basically, I was like, here's my life back. Can you do something with it? And that's one of those, that was one of my prayers, I remember, actually. God, if there's something, if there's anything you could do with my life, if there's anything you could make of what's left, this mess, it's yours. He called me out of it. He's still calling me out of it. He's calling me into something new. When Pastor Randall asked me to share this testimony, I was afraid, but I was also excited. And the reason I was excited was because I get to remember what Jesus did for me. I get to remember that he came and visited me. His presence came and whispered in my ear, cast your net one more time. Try one more time. When everything in me was saying, give up. You've tried before. You're going to fail again. His love came through and entered my heart and encouraged me. And from there, my life's just been unfolding and unfolding and unfolding. From coming to Vertical Church, starting to fellowship with Pastor Randall and a lot of the other guys here, coming to the revival, coming to the Young Adults Conference, it's like I started to see God's loving hand in my life and really what's transpired, really what happened to me in that detox. All that shame, for his glory. God and humanity being reconciled in love the way it was supposed to be, the way he created us. It's hard to put that into words, but that keeps me coming back. That keeps me seeking God in the morning when I wake up now. When God's word's spoken in power and in truth, it does something in our hearts. There's something he instilled in our hearts when he created us that responds to his word. Pour out your power and love. Amen.
Burton. That was awesome. Man.
Let's all bow our heads and close our eyes. Father, right in these moments where each of us are at, give us the courage, Lord, to truly let go. The things that we need to release. The areas where we need detachment, benevolent detachment. Jesus, you said, come to me all you are burdened and heavy laden. And we could find rest for our souls. So today, Almighty God, help us to let go of the troubles, the difficulties, the brokenness, the mistakes, the sins, all the things that trouble us and weigh us down, our worries, our fears, our concerns, and to know that you care, to know that we can trust you. But when we let go, we let you begin to take control, to lead us where we need to be. Help us today to begin the practice, Lord, of living in a way that we truly live to trust you, to let go and to let you do what only you can do. We're not in control. We humble ourselves before you today. And you said that to the humble, grace flows. So today, fill us with grace.